Now, back in 2024, Qualcomm made this huge splash with the launch of their Snapdragon chips for laptops. They promised to do for Windows laptops what Apple's M series did for theirs, giving you long battery life while eliminating annoyances like heat and fan noise. Of that first batch of laptops, the Yoga Slim 7X was the best. It had a stunning 14.5-inch OLED display, it performed really well, in fact the best of any of them that we tested, and it lasted the longest when unplugged. So, when this new one came out with Qualcomm's awesome new X2 Elite chip, I just immediately bought it. In fact, I switched to this as my daily driver for the last month or so, and I have to say I've really enjoyed using it. It's definitely better for my use case than the MacBook Air. But it is not for everyone. So let's hop in and I'm going to walk you through the pros and the cons of this new laptop and of course who should buy it. This year, the Slim 7X is a little smaller than the original model. That's because it now has a 14-inch display where it used to have a 14.5. I'm actually a little disappointed by this. I thought that 14.5-inch panel really made the Slim 7X quite unique and special. Having that much screen real estate in a thin and portable laptop made it really stand out. Now, on the panel itself, it's got very similar measurements, which is a good thing. It's a vibrant OLED screen that gets very bright at over 500 nits. It has excellent color accuracy, a fast refresh rate, it supports touch, and it has a high resolution, so small text it's going to look nice and crisp. I did detect a slight screen door effect, which is common on OLED touchscreens, which this of course is. That's when you're looking closely at white colored content and you can see some colored pixels peeping through. As I said, I didn't find it an issue when I was using this laptop. On other things that I didn't find an issue, I did detect PW and flickering used to control the screen's brightness, which again, it's common on OLED panels, but it didn't bother me at all. The one thing I did notice though is that the screen is very glossy. Given its high brightness, I was able to compensate for the screen's reflections in most environments, but I really think that Lenovo need to switch to a better anti-reflective coating. Now, before I leave the display, not all configurations of this laptop come with the same screen as ours. There is a lower resolution 60Hz panel that's in the cheaper models. Small text, of course, is not going to look as crisp on that display. The keyboard, it is noticeably a standout. It is so much more satisfying to use than most laptops that we test. There is ample key travel with a satisfying click. The keyboard layout is also standard, so I didn't mispress keys. Guys, Lenovo is really the industry leader when it comes to keyboard comfort, and it really shows here. Where they don't do well though is the keyboard's backlight. More light escapes around the keys than what comes through them. This is kind of blinding when you look at the keyboard from a diagonal position, which is what you do when you're using a laptop. What adds to this is the auto brightness setting that is meant to turn off the backlight when it isn't needed. It doesn't work at all. It just left the backlight on. Over to the trackpad. It is much improved this year. Yay! The original Slim 7X, guys, it was really held back by its cheap-feeling trackpad. It would have been the outright king of Qualcomm laptops if it had a better trackpad. Well, this year's is much improved. It is still mechanical, but it is close to as good as a MacBook's haptic trackpad. Not quite there, but it is close. Looking around the rest of the laptop, I think it looks nice enough in its dark blue color, but not amazing, and it does pick up fingerprints. The 7X feels well built with minimal keyboard deck and lid flex. That being said, it doesn't feel quite as well built as a MacBook. Let me give you an example. When you run your hands around the bottom of the laptop, you can clearly feel that the back panel, it just isn't flush against the rest of the machine. That doesn't happen on a MacBook. Also, this new 7X, it isn't as light as I would have hoped, especially given it now has a smaller display. It actually weighs around the same as the older model. Lenovo's own Yoga Slim 7i Ultra, which is their more premium version, that has an Intel chip, it is much lighter with the same size screen. Also, if anyone cares, you can't open this laptop with one hand, the hinge is too stiff. On this note, it is a touchscreen laptop. I think having a stiff hinge is a good thing. Now, one area of the laptop that you may be concerned about is the ports. There are just 3 USB 4 ports, no USB-A, no headphone mic combo jack, no HDMI. I had no problems with this at all. I use Bluetooth earphones and I've linked the ones that I use down below. I also don't need USB-A for my mouse. This laptop's trackpad is good enough. In fact, I really like that one port is on the right side, as I can charge from either side, which I find very convenient. So few laptops allow me to do this, and I really like it. Plus, all these ports are super fast. By the way, the power button, it is on the right side, so you may accidentally mispress it when you're gripping the laptop. You do have to hold it down for a while for it to register, and I never had a problem with it, but Seth said he did. Lenovo, just put the power button above the keyboard. Seriously. Alright, sound from the speakers, definitely not the laptop's strongest suit, it's a little muddy and it definitely lacks bass. Take a listen. Here's what I look like on the Yoga Slim 7X's 1440 webcam. I am in excellent studio lighting conditions here, so this is as good as you're going to get. And now here's what I look like in dimmer room lights, very grainy, not great. Alright, so I said this laptop CPU was awesome, and it's time I showed you why. This laptop can come with a couple of different Qualcomm CPUs. We have the highest end SKU with the 18-core X2 Elite 88100 chip. Yay for terrible product naming. But do keep in mind, the other processors, they aren't going to perform as good as ours. We are going to get some of those cheaper models in with, say, the X Plus chips, so get subscribed for our reviews on them. Anyway, my unit performs phenomenally well in CPU tasks. In Geekbench, this little laptop beats out the MacBook Pro 14 with the base M5 chip. That's in multi-core, it falls a little bit behind in single-core. Compared to Windows alternatives with Intel and AMD processors, this Qualcomm chip, it beats them. In Cinebench, which tests the laptop when pushed to its limits, this Slim 7X, it smashes the MacBook Pro 14 with a 10-core M5 chip, as well as what Intel and AMD have in their comparable laptops. When we look at power efficiency though, it's an even bigger win for this laptop. The Slim 7X drew less power than the MacBook Pro 14, substantially less than Intel and AMD's chips, yet, as I showed you, it beats them. Take a look at our power efficiency scatter plot. The 3 orange dots joined by a line, they represent this laptop running on each of its 3 different performance modes. You want to see here as much performance as possible for as little power as possible. This laptop is really in a league of its own in terms of performance and power efficiency, at least for its weight and price, so bravo Qualcomm and Lenovo. Now, a more power-efficient processor, it tends to mean less heat you feel, less fan noise, and better battery life. For my day-to-day use, just office apps, web browsing, that sort of thing, this laptop was dead silent at all times, and it never felt warm to the touch. Under a 10-minute CPU torture test, you can see that this laptop, it does get a bit warm, but it's really not that bad. It's way cooler than the MacBook Pro 14, and a couple of degrees cooler than the original Slim 7X. This new one, it did have some fan noise during that torture test, but guys, anything under 50 decibels, it's pretty good. Battery life is also fantastic on this laptop. Seriously, I took it on a 4.5-hour flight. Now, after using it the entire time, I had 60% remaining. This lines up with the whopping 10.5 hours it scored in our battery drain test. And by the way, our test is tougher than the others that I've seen out there. We don't just play videos on loops with the screen very dim. Instead, we have the laptop perform office tasks and we keep the screen at a more reasonable 300 nits of brightness. Folks, just for some context here, this laptop lasts longer than the MacBook Pro 14 with the base M5 chip. And by the way, that is the best configuration of the MacBook Pro 14 for battery life. The only laptop that beats this one substantially is Dell's XPS 14. But that laptop, it just doesn't perform nearly as well. Now, talking of performance, you don't lose any of that when you unplug this laptop. It can still perform at its max. One thing I do want to tell you about is by default, when you unplug this laptop, it does change its screen brightness based on the content you're looking at, and it is really annoying. Just go into Windows brightness settings and turn this off. So, for the most part, everything looks fantastic with this laptop, but it's time to talk about the not so good things. Let's start with the integrated GPU. The X290 in this laptop is just not the strongest performer. It's a little behind Apple's M5 Pro 10-core, it is well behind Intel's B390, and it is way behind laptops with an NVIDIA GPU, which you can absolutely find at this price point. Look, something like photo editing, it's totally fine on this laptop, but at this price point, if gaming or say doing creator tasks like video editing, if that's a priority for you, just buy something else. The next issue is application compatibility. We tested tons of specialist applications on these Qualcomm laptops. I'm going to link that video down below, but to sum up, Qualcomm processors, they use the ARM architecture. They require a different version of Windows, so even if an app, it looks like it runs on Windows, it may not run on this version of Windows, or may not run well. Premiere Pro, it runs natively, but our benchmark software, it wouldn't run. When doing a render in Blender, it used the CPU instead of the GPU, making it very slow. LM Studio had a similar problem. The GPU wasn't available to it. In gaming, some games ran well through emulation like Counter-Strike, but others didn't. My personal favorite game, and the one I spend way too much time on, League of Legends, it wouldn't run at all. My DJ software, it ran, but it couldn't detect my DJ controller, making it completely useless. Our 2.5 gig Ethernet adapter, it wouldn't work, even though our 1 gig adapter worked. Android Studio, it did run through emulation, but the Android emulator itself, it didn't work. Linux didn't run, even though we followed all the instructions out there. And big thanks, by the way, to our Linux backers on Patreon and YouTube. It's your generous support that has enabled us to do extensive Linux testing. Link down below if you want to help out too. Look, overall, if you're sticking to basic office tasks, web browsing, communication software, that sort of thing, this laptop is fantastic. I really enjoyed using it. However, if you plan to do more on your laptop, you need to do your research to see if what you want to run will work. Now, when it comes to pricing, at the time I filmed this video, this laptop, it ranged from a bit over $1,000 for the lower end processor with that lower resolution 60Hz display to around $1,600 for my model. Comparing the base Slim 7X to the MacBook Air, which costs around $900 and is good for a similar user, the Slim 7X has a more vibrant OLED display. It has a better keyboard and longer battery life. The Mac screen, though, it is brighter and it has a higher resolution, even though it's not an OLED. The Mac also feels more premium with a better trackpad. I think these are kind of similar in the value they bring. I'd say the Slim 7X, therefore, is competitively priced. When it comes to my model, it is definitely better than the MacBook Air. A better comparison would be the MacBook Pro 14. That's the one with a 10-core M5 chip. Compared to that laptop, my Slim 7X is more powerful, it has a more comfortable keyboard, it is lighter, and it has 32 gig of memory. The MacBook Pro, it has a larger display, more ports, and better app compatibility, which is weird I'm saying that, but it's true. Given my Slim 7X is $1,600, like I said, I think it's a fair buy. But before you buy any laptop, make sure to check out our website, bestlaptop.deals. Over there, we track prices right across retailers, so you'll be able to tell where to go to get the best deal. And is now a good time to buy, because sales change, they come and go. If you are planning to use specialized applications or do gaming, over there you'll find the laptops we recommend for you. I'm talking about the best laptops for creators, for gamers, and of course programmers. Let me know with a comment below what you think of this laptop, and with that said, go have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you later.